Excellent. Right, now we had a bit of a chat on the messenger before, didn't we? And we were sort of discussing what we should talk about tonight. And your response was we could go deeper into the yew tree rabbit hole. We could also discuss The Shining. Yeah. Also, I was thinking of doing a show about the utter brilliance of Viz and the Todmorden UFO incident, ?
I know.
So
just I
like all them ideas.
Just a little bit of a collective throwdown there, Lee.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would market that one, but shall we? I'm quite interested in this UFO over Todmorden, so should we get into that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Tell us all about this incident, because I've never heard of this. I mean, I'm not a massive ufologist, though I have got more into it since you keep mentioning it. So you're getting me into it slowly. But go on.
Well, it's a dangerous rabbit hole to get down, mate, I promise you. But I'm going to tell you about the Todmorden UFO incident that took place on the 28th of November, 1980. And it concerns...
the same year as Rendlesham, isn't it?
It is. It's the same year as Rendlesham. In fact, Rendlesham took place less than a month later, because it took place on the 24th, 25th and 26th of December 1980. Yes.
I always like that aspect of the Rendlesham case, you know, the fact that it did take place on those days.
Well, Rendlesham's an amazing case, and there's so much to it that, and it's been very heavily done, especially recently. I think it's really risen to the fore again in the last 4 or 5 years, I think. It's a fascinating case, Rendlesham. What's great about it, in a way similar to this, the Todmorden incident, is that official people have come forward over it. You know, people in some authority, people who represent the public in the way of documenting events. So in the case of Rendlesham, army officers. In the case of this one, the Todmorden UFO incident, it's the police force.
Right.
I digress slightly, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happened. So PC Alan Godfrey, on the 28th of November 1980, was checking reports of cattle that were wandering around the local council estates of Todmorden in West Yorkshire. As he was doing this, Godfrey claims he saw a bright light hovering above the road ahead that he described as a rotating diamond-shaped object of about 20 feet high and 14 feet wide. Godfrey states that he then tried to radio for help, but that the equipment in his car, you know, one of those lovely little old pandas, police pandas, back in 1980, the equipment wouldn't work.
Mm.
When the object suddenly vanished...
Well, it was 1980.
It was 1980. When the object then suddenly vanished after he was there tampering with his equipment, come on then, come on, Juliet Bravo, or whatever they used to say, Mayday, hello, come on, Jim, can you hear me? It's Goddard here, Alan Godfrey. Bloody
Godfrey Parks.
There's a fucking flying bloody diamond in the sky. Yeah, Godfrey Parks. Anyway, as he was tampering with the equipment, he looked up again. He suddenly realised that the object was then vanishing before his eyes. And he found himself to be 30 yards further down the road where he was.
Oh.
Exactly. According to Godfrey, he experienced missing time of approximately 25 minutes. So when he looked at his watch or his clock in his car, probably his watch, because I don't know if they even had bloody clocks in the car in 1980. Can't remember. He'd realised suddenly he'd lost 25 minutes. Okay? So Godfrey says, via hypnotic regression. Now, this took place because another police officer who'd heard his story, and this was a higher ranking police officer, heard his story, okay, and was intrigued by it, and he encouraged Godfrey to go under hypnosis. And as a consequence, this is what happened, okay. The hypnosis that was arranged by solicitor Harry Harris, Godfrey recorded a beam of light, okay, blinding him, and it made him pass out. And before waking up inside a room, being medically examined by small beings and a tall man with a beard, Might have been James Anderton of the Manchester Police Force.
Or Mark Lawrenson.
Now, this is Alan Godfrey's honesty, and I love this about him, because he said at the age of 70, however, Godfrey told the Examiner that the abduction part he had told under hypnosis was probably a dream, adding, he never said he was abducted by aliens.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, that very night, police officers around the area, other police officers around the area, saw a very unusual sighting in the sky and reported it on the very same night. But here is where things get really kinky in this fucking story, mate. Not in a sexual way.
Oh,
6 months earlier. 6 months earlier, a body was found in a coal yard. Okay, and this body belonged to a gentleman from the name of Zigmund Adamski. Okay. He had been missing for 3 days. He hadn't been seen since the 6th of June when he'd set out to buy groceries, and he didn't return home. And then Trevor Parker, who was working in the coal yard, had suddenly seen this body, suited body, on top of a coal pile, 10-foot high coal pile. It turned out to be the body of Zigmund Adamski, and nobody had any idea how it got there. Okay, there it was on top of the pile. In his panic, of course, called the police. The police came along, and hello, who was the officer who took the call? Only PC Alan Godfrey.
Right, bloody hell.
6 months before. They investigated the body. They couldn't find no damage done to his body. The suit that he was wearing was untouched and undamaged, but there was a mistake in how it was all buttoned up. It was almost like he'd been rushed to be dressed again. He had no shirt. That was the one thing that was missing. And he had no watch or wallet. So it could have been a robbery. But there was no understanding of how the body could have got to the top of the coal pile. And Parker was adamant to Alan Godfrey that he had looked on those coal piles earlier and there was nobody there. Nobody on top of the coal pile. Literally 20 minutes before. Nobody.
Right, so what's the theory then about how he ended up there?
Well, of course, ufologists have gone mad over this, haven't they? They've come up with the idea that the body was somehow dropped, that Adamski's body was dropped on top of the coal pile.
Yeah.
So the suggestion is that he was abducted by whatever was in the skies. The theory was that this could be the one and only case of alien abduction where someone had died in the aftermath of it.
I see, right. So, yeah, I mean, I could see that if he's on top of this coal pile, he could have just been dropped.
Indeed.
From a great height. Because, I mean, it's not the sort of place you'd wander about in if he... I mean, how did he die? Did he establish the cause of death, or?
Well, no, I think
I
think it was just like natural causes or heart attack,
Right. So why is he wandering up and climbing up a coal pile and then?
Well, this is the thing. Now you've made a perfect point there, Lee, because he didn't clamber up the coal pile. The coal pile was undisturbed. The coal pile was undisturbed, and Godfrey verified this, and so did Parker. Yeah. So it became a huge mystery, and it was a very, very troubling case. In fact, I think the chief of police said it troubled him greatly as to why Mr. Adamski was found on top of the coal pile, because there was no evidence to show that he'd had any big falling out with any member of the family. He was a beloved man who had just vanished for 3 days and then appeared, this is the thing, 20 miles away in a coal yard in Todmorden, on top of a coal pile that was 10 foot high and had been undisturbed. Wow.
That is like an episode of Jonathan Creek.
Other theories put forward have suggested that Adamski was killed by the KGB, or that he had been struck by a ball of lightning, gotten dazed and confused, and wandered off to the top of the coal pile and died. But that's absolutely nonsense, because, of course, Adamski was on top of the coal pile without any debris being moved, any sign of him being put on there. It was like a crane had dropped him on top of the coal pile. Okay.
10 years later, his son released a hit single that went straight to number one.
Well,
called Killer.
This is another. Now, this is another interesting thing, because there's another Adamski who took a photograph of UFO, the famous Adamski photograph, who had no relation to Zigmund Adamski.
Right.
Obviously, there's been speculation about the Adamski, because the Adamski death, and it's such an interesting coincidence that Alan Godfrey had been called out. And then 6 months later, Alan Godfrey has this very unusual experience. And Alan Godfrey was not somebody who was full of flights of fancy. He was a police. He was a small town police officer.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't believe any of that bollocks.
Just to clarify, so did you say that at the time he discovered the body or was investigating it, that he theorized that he had been abducted by aliens? Or did I mishear you there?
No, I think the way I'm reading this off, I'm reading bits of this off Wikipedia, and they're not really explaining this very well at all. Obviously, what's happened here is that after Godfrey's incident, he may have put two and two together.
Oh, so it was after. Yeah.
But there's a Adamski incident. The Adamski incident took place beforehand.
Yes.
So the Adamski incident took place in the June, on the 6th of June. He went missing.
6 a.m. Would have been.
He went missing on the 6th of June and then appeared on top of the coal pile on the 9th of June. That's when he called the police and hello. Here arrives Alan Godfrey. And it was a complete mystery. Just
to put forward a theory on how he ended up in the top of the coal pile, could it not be that the truck that delivered the coal and subsequently dumped it in a pile, Adamski had been hidden in that truck and came out with the coal?
I think part of the problem there is, and going off what had been said. Now, this is what's interesting, okay? This is another element that's interesting, okay? Adamski was wearing a suit, but his shirt was missing together with his watch and wallet. So it sounds like someone could have robbed him, right? Okay? His clothes were improperly fastened, and his hair had also been cropped short in a roughly cut manner. But he wasn't covered in coal. Okay? He wasn't covered in coal dust. He was in his suit without a shirt, and he was just left on top. So obviously, a lot of people have speculated on this because it seems so odd. And that, I think the big point is that Trevor Parker in the coal yard could have sworn that there was nothing on top of that coal pile just minutes before he then recognised the body on top. So it's a mad story. And Godfrey stuck to his guns with his story about what he saw,
Well, it reminded me, because Lemmy said that he saw a UFO in Yorkshire, didn't he? I think that was probably a bit earlier. And he said it was at a time when he wasn't doing any drugs or drinking.
It is a fantastic incident because he's got corroborative evidence from other police officers. Now, there was this theory from a skeptical point of view that there was some kind of experimental camper van that was being used and shown off in the Todmorden area and locally. And
Scooby-Doo in it.
Scooby-Doo, and Thelma was there, but she's not a lesbian, right? Some of Godfrey's drawings of what he saw had some, and I say this very strictly, some resemblance of this experimental camper van. Okay, or caravan.
What? So he mixed
this
up
prototype
with a camper van.
So some people might suggest that he was very tired. That he
probably had a drink they used to in them days.
He's had a couple of pints down the pub. He's come on duty to do the night shift. He's rubbed his eyes. He's seen this prototype, futuristic looking caravan, and he's thought,
on a hill. So he thought he was in the sky. Well, I am a skeptic about UFO sightings, but I think that one does have something going for it. He was a policeman and he would have been subject to more scrutiny and ridicule, perhaps from his mates about that. So it could have threatened his career, couldn't it, if he's coming up with this outlandish story? They probably thought he'd gone a bit mad.
Well, I think they did, and I think he did suffer some ridicule and a little bit of ostracisation by other members of the police team. and he didn't financially benefit from it. It's kind of like what happened in some ways to Travis Walton, which was a much bigger case, a huge case. And there's a great interview on the latest Joe Rogan with Travis Walton, one of the latest ones, where he talks about what happened to him. And he's never wavered in his story, he's never changed, and he hasn't really financially benefited from it.
He's not wrote a book about it, and he
had.
There's been a film about it, hasn't there?
I'm sure there's been some financial benefit. I think they all say that Bob Lazar hasn't really benefited from his story, but the Travis Walton thing is interesting because he's taken about 5 polygraph tests and passed them all. But the thing with Godfrey is, he's a local Bobby. He doesn't need to tell this story. He wasn't someone who was into UFOs or aliens.
No.
He's obviously seen something remarkable, or he's had some kind of remarkable kind of psychedelic trip in his head. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's had some kind of moment. The Adamski thing throws a little bit of mystery to something. It's
in a way that's the bigger mystery, isn't it?
It is quite a big mystery. I do like it. I'm glad you said that, Lee, because I kind of thought you were verging on poo-pooing it all. But
no, I'm getting more into it.
It is interesting, the Adamski thing, because it's so unusual, and the whole of that West Yorkshire team were baffled by it, And this was a weird time around there as well.
It would have been just before they caught the Ripper, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
Hey, Dave, he's wrote a book, I think.
He has indeed.
Who or what were they?
Who or what were they? Yeah, and it says the book is the self-published book.
You can tell by the cover.
Alan Godfrey.
Oh God, I've got to describe this cover, Dave. It's got a police car.
Yeah.
At the bottom, more of a modern police car than probably the one he was driving, because it's got the sort of yellow and red emblem on it, and then it's got probably half the cover is taken up by an alien face, or half of an alien face, and behind that is a UFO or a disc-shaped object in the sky, and the font is really poor, but I really want to get hold of that book.
So do I. I want to get hold of it too. And it says here that the book includes his speculations regarding the Adamski case, abduction claims by Travis Walton, who we just mentioned there, and his own UFO sighting. So very interesting.
See, it's an incident I've never heard of before, that one, being fairly local to me.
Yeah, it is. It's a great little story. And the thing is, if you look on YouTube, there's a fantastic 30-minute documentary about it that tells the story, the 3 links of the story, really, very, very well. And the 3 links are the officers that saw the sightings in the sky, Godfrey's own strange experience, okay, and then the incident of Adamski 6 months earlier. So it's very nicely done, I think. And I think what the documentary does very well is it comes to the Adamski thing last. So
right.
It backtracks to the Adamski thing beforehand and says, hey, guess who was? And that's what I was trying to do. Hey, guess who was the police officer at the time of the Adamski case? Alan Godfrey.
The way you started that story was very interesting with the cattle, because there's always been a link between cattle mutilation and UFOs, isn't there? And I've heard some very compelling stories and read some police reports in America.
Yes.
About, these are just like very dry police reports about cattle that have been found with strange wounds to them. I suppose the theory is that aliens are doing something with them. They're examining them, or they're doing some sort of dissection on them to find out more. But that is a very strange aspect of the whole ufology and alien visitations, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting because there's a lot of things that seem to link these sightings that are hard to refute.
Yeah.
One tends to be disruption of livestock. The other one tends to be around like power stations or nuclear facilities. These ones have quite often been reported by people of authority, and that's a very key point to be made. One last thing to say as well, that in the 25 minutes that Godfrey had experienced a loss of time, he had realized that his boot had split and that he had a very itchy red mark on his foot. So this is another thing that had suddenly just had happened, And his experience of the UFO, by the sound of it, was not a long period of time, as he remembers it. So it was just seeing this diamond-shaped object about 25 feet high, 14 feet wide, and then trying to radio for help, and then that was it. It vanished in front of him, and the time loss, and realizing he had this red mark, damage to his boot. Very weird incident. Very, very weird. And he's carried it with him. You know, it's one of these things it's what struck me very strongly about listening to Travis Walton was he was such a young man when his incident happened. He's an old man now. It happened 45 years ago. Yeah. But he still talks about it as being this really traumatic incident in his life. And that is the thing. You can't dismiss people when they're speaking on those terms, even if it's been a moment of mental illness or something, or if there's been like a minor stroke in the brain and they've hallucinated, or whatever it is, it's definitely been a big incident. But the Walton case, which is worth talking about at some point, the interesting thing with the Walton case is that when he stepped into the light, the beam of light, other people saw him do it. He ran off towards this object in the sky in the beam of light with his workmates in the van. When he flipped in the air and disappeared, his workmates all fucked off because they shit themselves.
Right.
And then he disappeared for 5 days. So
did he turn up naked in some sort of gas station?
That's in the film, and I don't think he did in reality. The film took a lot of liberties with his story, to be honest.
I think it's called Fire in the Sky, isn't it, with Robert Patrick? It's a good film.
Great film. They did take liberties with his stories, and they took liberties with the abduction element of the story. And I think the interesting thing is, many people, myself included, have seen unusual things in the sky. Maybe not anything like as dramatic as PC Godfrey's, but certainly stuff that can't really explain when you've logically dismissed other things, you know. Mm-hmm. But this, I think, is a really interesting case because, again, you're dealing with people of authority, people who are supposed to be trained describers, people who take down facts, look at a situation and look at it objectively. And the fact that there was corroborating police officers who'd seen things in the area at the same time or around the same time is fascinating. And it links, like you said, beautifully with Rendlesham. And that whole era is fascinating to me, and as it is to you, mate.
Yeah.
That kind of 1980s things. That is the pre-capture of the Ripper. You've got this taking place in Todmorden. You've got the whole incident in Rendlesham. These were very strange days indeed. We were still right in the heart of the Cold War as well. Let's not forget that.
That's right.
That could be a very important factor, very interesting factor to all of it, you know, especially Rendlesham, but this as well. You know, these are deep, dark, rural places where if someone was wanting to use some kind of experimental craft, let's say, you could probably get away with it.
I mean, do you think that there are as many reports these days? I mean, you follow it more than I do. You know, are people reporting UFOs more now, or has that dropped off?
I think the ones that come out nowadays are even more. The ones that come out from an official line, i.e. fighter pilots.
Yeah, they're very convincing because often the audio is available, isn't it?
And I think when what Walton says is brilliant. He says, you know, people, if you want to be a skeptic and say, well, you know, we've got digital cameras, everyone's got a camera nowadays, where are the really great photographs? First of all, you know, if something's flying high in the sky, you're not going to get a great photograph, are you? But the other side of it is, you know, he makes the point, if they're here and they're from another planet, let's say, they're super advanced. They're miles ahead of we are. They might be a million years ahead of we are as far as technology is concerned, you know. And if they're doing these things, they probably are doing it just to let us know, because they damn well would be able to do these things without letting us know. If they've got this capability of this technology, they'd be able to do it without showing us anything, without us even knowing they were there. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a good point. Makes a good point. I just think out of all the mysteries, Most of the other mysteries, you can absolutely carte blanche, flat, broke, debunk them straight away. Most of them. But ufology keeps coming at you with a little curveball. There's always something else. And it tends to be because there's been very, very credible witnesses.
Well, you turned me on to Bob Lazar 8 months ago, and I watched. I'd never heard of Bob Lazar, and I watched a documentary. I think it's on Netflix or Amazon, and I was fascinated by him because he does come across as a very credible witness.
Yes.
With perhaps, I mean, it sounds, for one thing, to me, it doesn't sound like he's making it up. He could possibly have deluded himself or convinced himself of something that isn't actually true. But he didn't come across like that. So I was really fascinated listening to what he said, and describing things that he says he's seen.
But this is the thing. Lazar, again, comes across as a very plausible guy. He seems like a very normal, plausible guy. And so much of what he said has been proven to be true,
Well, yeah, there was that thing about him describing this hand scanner that apparently has since been proven that did exist. I think I'm right saying that.
And it's the element as well, the element that they thought was bogus and full of shit when he first talked about it, and then they realised it was real. But they discovered it was almost like they discovered it after he'd spoken about it. And that was really kind of, oh, hello, that's interesting, that's crazy. And what makes, of course, these things more plausible now is that in the world of astronomy, we're finding more and more facts. We're finding now that each star, on average, has God knows how many planets based around it, just like we have. And that is multiplied by millions. So the chances of there being other life forms and other lives out there in the universe have grown exponentially over the last 20 years in our understanding. And this is the great thing. We can now say with some certainty that there is other life out there. It's just that we can't get to grips with it in our galaxy. It's out there,
The other thing I found interesting about Lazar was the way he described how this alien spacecraft worked. It was about manipulating the space in front of it.
Yeah.
Sort of travel, long distances in a very short period. And if he'd made that up, it sounded like quite a genius concept.
It did indeed, mate. I thought that was really interesting. You make a brilliant point there, Lee, actually. That's a really good point. Because the big and interesting issue about all this and about the best sightings, like the Tic Tac sightings, is
they're good. Yeah,
they are good because they show a craft that is obviously not being propelled through jets. It's a different kind of propulsion. It's a different kind of way of travel that we have in nowhere near shape or form mastered, Yeah. And it would suggest that if you could have a craft like that, which had some incredible power source that allowed you to travel at immense speeds and stop in a heartbeat to go to nothing and hover in the sky, it would offer you so much reward, We could be traveling to Australia in an hour, with the way these things look.
Well, coincidentally, I was watching an episode of The X-Files last night, and I think it was episode 2 of season 1. And in that, they're investigating something that's happened to this fighter pilot. And they show these aircraft, these supposed UFOs at this military base that are moving like the Tic Tac crafts. I'm going to start watching all the X-Files because I'm sure they probably have a lot of storylines that are based on real events.
The thing that excites me, the crux of it for me, and has been for a long time, probably over the last, I've probably been really hooked on this one aspect of it for probably the last 5 years. And that is the sighting. I'm not into the Whitley Strieber abduction stuff. I'm not into.
I was trying to think who that was because I read his book when I was a kid.
Yeah, it terrified me, mate.
About 14, 15.
What effect did it have on you when you read it? It terrified
Well,
me.
I can't remember, to be honest. I don't even know if I finished it. But
Oh, God,
what's it called?
It's called Communion.
So,
do you know what? I'm friends with him on Facebook. Actually,
oh yeah.
I could message him.
Is he
private
still
message him
banging on about it?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to diss the guy too much or anything, because I have to say, if nothing else, it had an impact on me as far as I think I'd already heard about the Betty and Barney Hill incident, and then I read Communion, and the way he described it, the way there they were in his bedroom, it felt really intrusive, and it was almost to me like the idea of the dark figure at the end of the bed. You know what I mean? It's almost like Black Sabbath.
I was just thinking of Sabbath, yeah.
Do
you know what's weird about it? It happened on the 26th of December, 1985.
Did it really?
So
Again?
Similar to Rendlesham around.
That's interesting. Rendlesham is remarkable because Rendlesham, there's so many witnesses to that event. I
was reading something in the 14 Times recently, because they have I think it's a yearly event with Rendlesham. That they have sort of what do you call them? Not conferences, but sort of meetings about it anyway. And Charles Holt is often at them, so he's obviously made quite a decent career on the speaking circuit. But to me, he seems a bit weird, Charles Holt.
Well, he does a bit, doesn't he? Does a bit.
Yeah,
but
he seems a bit dumb.
Yeah.
I don't think he's that credible. I mean, you know more about this case than I do, but I did see a documentary on the case where a lot of the evidence was dismissed or explained in a different way. Sort of like the lighthouse that was nearby. But what makes me skeptical about the Rendlesham thing is that why is a UFO landing in a military base? Or is there a different explanation to that? Is that the fact that they had the UFO, they'd caught the UFO?
No, the UFO had landed.
Why would it land there then?
And Jim Penniston, he was the guy who went with his colleagues and went right up to it. It had landed. And I think this was on Christmas Eve, this had taken place, or Christmas Day, on the verge of Christmas Day. And they went right up to it, and he touched it, and he wrote down these symbols that were on it. So this idea that this is a guy who's actually touched a UFO. And again, they lost some time and have got some sort of differences of opinion of what happened, because it all became kind of unclear. And so this is the other thing with this kind of ufology idea, is this almost like other dimensional sort of capacity that takes place within these stories, so that feeds the idea of like this multi-dimensional world or universe, that something from another dimension comes into ours. Or the other argument with the Rendlesham thing is a lot of people believe that it was a nuclear facility. And again, there's been these various sightings of these objects appearing around nuclear facilities. So Rendlesham slips into that. Charles Holt's situation took place, I think, the following night, because it returned the following night, and there'd been all this talk on camp about this amazing incident that had taken place, that Penniston had gone out there with his other officers, Sergeant Penniston, and actually seen the thing, touched the thing before it went off again. So when it re-emerged, Charles Holt, who was the deputy, he was the second in command of the whole base. This is a massive, this is RAF Bentwaters, you know what I mean? He was the second in command there of the base. This is a big cheat.
So you wouldn't think he's going to put his neck on the line.
Exactly, and he didn't. And this is what is great about this story, Lee, because he went there and he recorded it, and he witnessed these lights, which he refutes to suggest it was the lighthouse is nonsense, because of the situation of the woodland and what they saw. They said they saw the lighthouse all the time, any beams from the lighthouse. This was not like this. This was like it had intelligent control, the way it moved through the forest. That's really interesting.
So it moved. I didn't know it actually moved.
Yeah, it came in. The light came in through the forest. The orb-like object or whatever it was. The thing that Penniston saw was almost like a small triangular disc. It wasn't big. And actually, in Rendlesham Forest, you can go there today and go on the UFO trail, and there's a statue of the actual object there in Rendlesham Forest. So if you Google image that, you will see what Jim Pendleton and his colleagues saw the description of it, they've turned that into a statue.
Yeah.
So I'd love to go and do it. We'll have to go and do it.
Yeah, I would like to do that as well. Is it Norfolk?
Yeah, it's Norfolk. It's a beautiful part of the world. I'd love to go there. I've only travelled through Norfolk. I've never spent any time in Norfolk.
Oh, I have. I've been
you
on
have
a few times. Yeah.
I'm jealous of
been on the MR James beaches.
I know you have. I'm dead jealous of that. That's fantastic. So this was then kept under wraps on the base, right? And it wasn't until there was two very interested women who lived locally.
Oh, yes. These are the Hetty Wainthrops.
The Hetty Wainthrops. And I love this part of the story. I think, is it Dot Street?
I think Jenny Randalls is involved.
Well, she came in as a consequence.
Did she?
Of
right.
the two others. It's Dot Street, Brenda Butler, and then Jenny Randalls. And it started off with Brenda Butler and Dot Street were enthusiastic amateur investigators. And they got really into this. So much so that they pestered and pestered until they got a member of the staff, the uniformed staff on Rendlesham, to leak information. And then from there, they got some documentation somehow. I can't quite remember how it happened, but they really worked it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They really investigated it and ended up, in the end, getting in touch with Charles Holt. And they said, look, we're going to take this to the press. You need to come forward and talk about this. He wasn't going to say anything because, as he always points out, that's his career. It's deadly for his career.
Mm-hmm.
He was a career officer, wasn't he? So, like you said, it was brilliant. We've spoken about this before, talking about casting these three middle-aged women who got themselves fascinated by this incident that took place and then brought it in the end to national attention. And it's now become an international debated incident.
Yeah, it's one of the most famous cases, isn't it? Particularly in this country. I can't think of a more famous one, but...
What pisses me off is I spoke to an actress stroke writer friend of mine who's been on telly a few times, one thing or another. And I put this story to her. I said, you want to write this? And there's probably a part in here for you. This is great. This is about 40-something women who were mothers, well, two of them were, who were just fascinated by this hushed incident that had taken place on this very important defence base in Britain. And they managed to get it to the Houses of Parliament and published in the newspaper. And they brought in this investigative journalist in this sort of esoteric field. Great story, great background. Oh, yeah. wasn't fucking interested.
I think you're either into ufology or you're not, aren't you?
What surprised me is this person in question said, I love stuff about UFOs. I love this kind of story. Yeah. And I thought this has got the perfect sort of marriage, this story of kind of gritty 1980s Britain, with this fantastical story and the added on element of this investigation of taking place by these three women, who were getting castigated left, right,
that's
and centre.
The hook, isn't it? That makes it very good drama. That's coming out
exactly
a different angle, and I'm surprised it hasn't been made into something as yet. I know we were thinking of doing it, weren't we, or at least writing it, but
it's gathered more moss, if you like, as time's gone on, and created a lot of controversy. Because Jenny Randall's changed her opinion about it as well. She's changed, from what I've heard, she's gone in different directions over it. Certainly aspects of it anyway. And you're absolutely right in what you were saying about Holt. There is some skepticism with Holt.
He's compromised in a way, isn't he? That he needs to keep this going. So he may be tempted to exaggerate or embellish in parts.
Yeah.
I suppose you can always look back on those original reports, which he probably never thought would ever get out into the public. And
no, exactly.
He's putting his neck on the line, isn't he? By suggesting that something very strange and perhaps alien-based is happening there. So,
he has made this sort of sub-career, as a lot of people who have had these, something strange has happened, whether it's been in Rendlesham's case, has there been some kind of strange mass hallucination from very tired people on a defense base at a time when we were afraid that nuclear destruction was imminent? That could be the case. You know, you can't write anything off, can you? But again, they're trained observers, professional observers. The thing that has made Holt's ufology career, I suppose you could say, is his tape recording, because when he went out into the forest that night, he gives this running commentary of what he's seeing. And that is...
Right. Yeah, he just reminded me about that.
That's kind of fascinating. It's something that you can probably get a copy of it on YouTube right now and have a listen to it, which is really fascinating. So it is fantastic. And there's been so much written about Rendlesham. And so many important people have come out. I mean, it was talked about in the House of Commons. There was this very high-ranking lord who was like chief of the defence staff, came out and said that it was, as far as he was concerned, it was a real event and that it would should be taken very seriously. There was another woman whose name escapes me, wrote this book where she spoke to Margaret Thatcher about it. The title of her book is What Thatcher Said Back to Her. I've just been searching for it on the computer and I can't remember the name of the lady. She's passed away recently, and she wrote this book, and the title it perfectly encapsulates the feeling of the time about these things, which along the lines of, we can't let the public know, you know. The public don't need to know. God,
you're right, Dave. I'm just looking at Amazon. There's absolutely loads of books here.
Yeah.
Loads of them.
Rendlesham is a career in itself for a lot of people, isn't it?
Well, there's one by Nick Pope who I never really...
Yeah, Nick Pope. I was going to say he's right on it.
Yeah. He's always on them shit bloody documentaries, isn't he? He's another one that's made a huge career about it, hasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Left at the East Gates. That's by Larry Warren. I wonder who that is.
Larry Warren, now he's the guy, I think I'm right in saying, who went there with Jim Penniston initially. And his story is very different from Jim Penniston's. So what's happened here is there's a lot of different angles from this story, but there's also a lot of people from Rendlesham who saw things who won't speak about it at all. This is another thing that's interesting. So something's gone on, man. Something's gone on big time. Yeah. Another guy is Jim Burrows. He's had a strange career out of it as well, you know. All these people who've been involved in it.
It's our Roswell, isn't it?
It is, without doubt, our Roswell. And some people are starting to come to the conclusion that it's even more of an important event than Roswell. The reality is, from the point of view of legitimizing the idea of UFOs, you know, the idea of an unidentified flying object has got to be what's taken place in the last couple of years, which is for the Pentagon to come out and say what Dave Fravor saw, what the other pilots saw in 2014, saw in the sky, we have no answer for. They are legitimate unidentified flying objects. For the biggest military organization in the world to come out and say that is a huge breakthrough.
Well, we mentioned that, didn't we, on a few podcasts ago, that they were about to reveal something. And did anything actually get revealed? Because they said something about we've found materials that
it's just gone
are
quiet.
Not of this world.
What people believe is that they release these things on like a Friday afternoon when people are getting ready for the weekend and stuff as well. So it's almost like to try and get it brushed aside quickly, you know. It's really, really interesting that takes place. But again, Lee, I'm baffled by that too, because this came out as a legitimate report that things that debris had been found by vehicles not of this earth, and then they're nothing. They're nothing. And it's
bastards.
But it is almost like we're being fed a little bit at a time. So my feeling is, and the conclusion I've come to, is that there is more going on than we know, but there are some people who know considerably more than us. Now, their considerably more might not be very much, but they at least know that there's things going on, and we're being weaned it. And possibly being weaned it because authorities feel that it's not an imminent threat to us as a race.
But why now, though, Dave?
Because that's my only theory, is that because they believe that they are benign. It's slowly dawning if you think about military people around the world, they're always ready to get on the front foot, aren't they? To go into battle.
Yeah.
And have, but if you've got something that you have no control over, it's a terrible threat to your defenses.
Yeah.
But if you feel that suddenly you realize that these things aren't going to be a threat because they haven't been. It's 50 years, there's been no threat. There's been no physical danger. It's not COVID-19 or the bomb. It's interest and curiosity. And therefore, there's a weaning process of letting out a little bit more information at a time. That's the only thing I can speculate. If more corroborative evidence came out and something remarkable, I'm not saying like Arrival, which is, that's incredible. That's almost like the dream when there's this thing that just waiting there. I don't think now that I would obviously be a little bit concerned in some way, but I'd be more excited.
I would definitely.
I'd be so excited. I think it would be so incredible. And the thing to me is the reason why I think, I'm going to stay with it and keep an interest in it, because it's got to be the most significant thing in our lifetimes. If we found that there was intelligent life visiting Earth from somewhere else, there'd be nothing to compare. Nothing.
No.
Absolutely nothing. What would compare with that, Lee? What would compare? Not even going to the moon. There'd be nothing. It's so romantic and brilliant, and that's the element of it that I enjoy. I enjoy that idea of the sighting, the interesting sighting. That's the mystery to me. I don't like it.
I remember, Dave, ever since I was a kid, just being fascinated by UFOs.
Yeah.
And going out every night, just trying to spot them, and being convinced that planes in the sky were UFOs, and keeping diaries and logs, and just staring out the window for hours. It was one of those subjects.
Oh yeah, without doubt.
Like dinosaurs. When you're a kid, you're into
yes,
dinosaurs,
exactly.
UFOs, other things like that, and it's something that I did probably lose interest in, but now my sort of interest is coming back, and I, even if it's all hogwash, it's still a really nice thing to be into, I think.
Without a shadow of a doubt.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful there is something in it. I really am. I think to be.
Well, I'm gonna put my neck out there and say I think there is something in it. I think there is. I think there's.
Well, if you're saying that and Lemmy said it, then
thanks.
Who am I to argue?
Oh, mate, you put me in there with Lemmy. That's fantastic. I love you forever. I just wish I could find just one last quote, Ely. The name of this woman for this book. It's just doing my head in. I'm just trying to find out. See if I can find it through Amazon. Let me have a little look.
I noticed Godfrey's book is currently unavailable on Amazon, and it says for ages 1 to 3 years. So I'm not sure what that says about it.
I don't know.
It gets a lot of good reviews.
Oh, have you seen that? You can get a UFO cow abduction beam. Oh yeah,
cow abduction.
A UFO cow abduction, and brackets underneath it. Beam up your bovine. It's like a lamp. It's a lamp.
I'm gonna get that. I'm impressed with
£8.99, £8.19. I've got to get one of them.
Defo, yeah. I'm impressed with Alan Godfrey's reviews, unless they're all his family members. But there's lots of really good reviews. I think they're all 5 stars. Yeah, 21 5-star reviews.
Wow. I need to get that book and have a read of it properly, because it's a great little story, fascinating little story.
It's worth it for the cover alone, Dave.
Yeah. I've got to look.
I noticed he's got the classic alien grey.
Yeah. Oh, we've not mentioned the greys, have we? But I think what's good about what we've been talking about tonight, which has been really good, is that we're not trying to take it to the sensational level, because I'm not interested really in that. I'm not interested in the grey. I would be if they, appeared. I'm interested in the sightings. I love. There's a show. You can see it sometimes, I think, on Channel 4, but you can get a lot of the episodes on YouTube, and it's actually called Close Encounters, and it's half-hour episodes of reconstructing these sighting incidents, and there's some brilliant incidents, people seeing unusual things. None of them go into this idea of abduction. It's all about sightings, and that's what interests me. And there's been incredible sightings. The one over Jersey by the private plane owner. Fascinating. And I would say those documentaries by James Fox, the documentarian, are really good to watch. You can get 2 of them on YouTube. There's one that you can buy on Amazon. The one on Amazon's supposed to be excellent. And the one, I think it's called I Know What I Saw, is very, very good. And the one that his latest one is called Phenomenon, which deals with all the latest Pentagon releases, the Dave Fravor sightings, the Tic Tac, the Nimitz, all that kind of stuff. And what is so fascinating is these school sightings, the one in Australia and the one in Zimbabwe. They are really fascinating stories.
Oh, yeah.
I look into them. They are incredible stories because all the kids were separated and told to come in and explain what they'd seen separately by the psychiatrist, and they all had the same story. Fantastic.
Right. One of the sightings, I think it was video footage that I saw. I think it was something I saw in like a compilation of UFO sightings. Was some amazing footage from Russia.
Yes.
About, I think it might have been lights in the sky or objects in the sky, and it was like camcorder footage, which was really compelling. And
absolutely. I've seen some of those images, and they're really, really unusual. And I tell you what's as interesting as the Russia ones, very interesting. Some of the Mexican sightings. There's one with this object that every so often releases this, excretes like this gas out the back end of it. That is quite creepy, actually. You know, but also it has a similar look to the Tic Tac. There's many very, very interesting film sightings. This is the thing. It's not like there aren't many. There's plenty to go at. Just to go back, this woman, and I think she's passed away now, unfortunately, Georgina Bruni, her name is. She wrote a very, very good novel, apparently, about Rendlesham. I haven't read it. And it was titled, You Can't Tell the People. And that apparently was a direct quote from Margaret Thatcher when Georgina Bruni asked her about Rendlesham Forest. You can't tell the people.
Very Thatcher-like, that.
It really is.
Anyway, it's been a fascinating chat, Dave.
Yeah, loved it, Lee.
I hope people have enjoyed it. So
I hope you have to.
That's another pod in the bag.
And that's it, folks. Remember, keep your feet firmly on the ground, but your head and eyes in the stars. And the great thing is, if you're an ornithologist like me and my wife, you can go out, look at the birds, but also be having one eye for something else in the sky.
Right. Thank you for listening, people. If you like what we're doing, please rate us on iTunes or comment on our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We will be back soon.